Hello, everyone. Welcome. My name is Elena Martinez, and I'll be the technical manager for this session entitled Engaging the Private Sector to Create a More Nutritious Food Environment. This session will be chaired by Catherine Merkel from ACDI Voca, who will also introduce her co-facilitators shortly. Thank you so much for taking part in ANH 2024. We look forward to a really robust and interactive session today. And a quick reminder that you can find the program for ANH Academy Week 2024 on our website, and we'll share the link in the chat shortly. Before I pass this over to Catherine, I'd like to share a few technical announcements. First, this session will be recorded, and it will be posted on the ANH Academy website following the session. You've all been muted as you enter the Zoom room, but please introduce yourselves in the chat. You can let us know your name, where you're calling in from, and what organization you work with. If possible, we encourage you to turn on your webcam video during the session. This allows us to have the most interactive session possible. Throughout the session, you can share your questions and comments in the chat box. We'll be actively monitoring. And if you do experience any technical difficulties, we encourage you to check your video and audio settings. And you can also put a message in the chat or send a direct message to me or anyone else on the participant list with ANH Academy in their name, and we will help you troubleshoot. And finally, we've noticed a few people are bringing AI note takers or recording bots into the sessions. And for now, we've decided to request that you not record the session using AI. We will be recording the session and posting the video and any related materials on our website afterwards so that you can review this material. So thank you so much. I'm going to pass this over to Catherine to get the session started.
Great. Thank you so much, Elena. Thank you so much to the ANH Academy team for putting this all together and all of their work organizing these sessions. So today, we're talking about how we can engage with the private sector to enhance our nutrition goals, to create a more nutritious food environment. So to start with, I wanted to get to know everybody a little bit. We have a mural board that we'll be using for some group work later. And we wanted to use this as an opportunity to get you into the mural board. And as people are working on that, I'll start some introductions. So my name is Catherine Merkel. I'm a technical director of nutrition and food systems at ACDI Voca. My role ranges from new business development to project support. Typically at ACDI Voca, we're implementing a lot of food systems and market systems projects. So partnering with the private sector is a pretty core piece of what I do. And in recent years, we've really seen that there's an opportunity for engaging with food businesses and businesses all along the food system to enhance the outcomes of nutrition at the end of the day. And this is something where we've seen a lot of opportunity from this, but it's something that, there's still a lot of hesitancy about, I think, in the nutrition and food systems community, and for good reason. So that's why we wanted to take the time today to conduct a lab on this and to get people familiar with the process and some of the best practices for how we can engage with private sector ethically and with the, getting the results that we want to see from those partnerships. We also have with us Jaume Jacques Jr. He's our nutrition and food systems specialist on FTF Resina. I'll turn it over to him to introduce himself briefly.
Thank you, Catherine. Hi, everyone. So my name is João Jacques Jr. I'm the nutrition and food system specialist working for the project FTF Resina that is implemented. It's been currently implemented in Mozambique. In two provinces, Nampula and Zambeza, for those who are familiar with Mozambique. So my role basically is to oversee all activities related to nutrition and food systems and support the regional offices on implementing all activities and also engaging with the private sector on nutrition activities. Thank you.
Thanks, JJ. And then we also have joining us Jaume Kalima, who's our capacity building specialist on FTF Resina. Jaume, are you here?
I'm Kalima. I'm Jaume Kalima. I am the capacity building specialist at FTF Resina, and as well, I'm also the focal point for the private sector. Basically, I'm supporting my colleagues in engaging with the private sector in terms of developing the partnerships between FTF Resina and our private sector.
So, Zhao, who we know as JJ, and Jahamo have a lot of experience with these topics, and we're looking forward to hearing from them more a little bit about that experience later on. So now that we've all had a chance, let's see, how are we doing over here? So why is it that we should engage with the private sector to help achieve our nutrition objectives? Well, we all know the private sector, the food system currently is not reliably supplying enough affordable or nutritious foods. And private sector businesses, ranging from very small entrepreneurs to large multinational corporations, control the priorities for what food is created and where and how it's sold to consumers. So there's an opportunity here to create and demonstrate incentives, what we call the business case, for shifting business investments into activities that have positive impacts on nutrition. And of course, away from activities that have negative impacts on nutrition. And by finding ways to partner with the private sector, we can create a nutritious food system that leads to broader impacts, more sustainability, and more efficiency for the creation and distribution of nutritious food. So today we're going to go through a very quick overview of the food system and food environment concepts from the perspective of private sector engagement. We're going to look at some ways that we can identify and select for private sector partners, how we develop the partnerships, creating shared value and additionality, and an overview of what it actually looks like to negotiate these processes, the co-creation process. And then we're going to do a case study workthrough where we're going to develop a partnership design. And then at the end, we're going to wrap up and we're going to talk a little bit about what adaptive management of partnerships looks like. Once you have a partnership, what then? How do you maintain it? How do you move from there? So very quickly, this is our conceptualization of the food system and the food environment in relation to it. You'll have seen these concepts on several other diagrams that depict the food environment as well. We like this one to show how the food system, through this interface of the food environment, can lead to overall thriving and prosperous societies. That when we talk about what we're doing in the food system, how it has a broader impact, this is one of those pathways. We used to have, this is, I think, a shift in thinking. We used to have at the end that there were business objectives at the end of this, that there was opportunities for profit and business growth. But we've changed that recently because, I think we're sort of seeing in our world today that there's more than just business growth and more than just economic growth. It's a benefit for investing in the food system. So thriving and prosperous societies. So just quickly, here was our diagram of the food system and the food environment. And then the important thing when you're thinking about private sector engagement is all of the ways that private sector actors are shaping the food environment. From production systems, processing and packaging, retail markets, storage and distribution, all of the stages along the food system have implications for the type and quantity and availability and price of foods that become available to the consumer. I won't go through this slide in much detail, but I think it's a good resource when you're thinking about what activities you might undertake with any given private sector along the food system for how you can influence, at the end of the day, how you can influence the food environment. A good tool that we would recommend that sort of has all of this information in a very easy to use format is the Tanager Nutrition Sensitive Intervention Selection Tool. So that moves beyond this idea of nutrition sensitive agriculture into understanding that there are opportunities for nutrition sensitive programming along the entire food system. And those are the types of activities that you can undertake with businesses along at every step of the food system. So here they are in a bulleted list. That tool online that there should be a link to in the lab description has a very helpful series of menus that lets you select what nutrition sensitive activities you might want to undertake given where you are working in the food system and what type of actors you're working with. And then it's important to remember that all of these actors are working within the context of an enabling environment. And this provides supporting functions such as connectivity between actors, aspects like research, services, human capacity, and also then the rules and norms that govern what actors can undertake. So standards, formalization, policies, different protections that exist. This is the system and the context in which businesses have to operate. And so one of the ways that we can engage with the private sector is not necessarily through direct partnership with businesses, but by working with actors that influence this enabling environment to create an environment that enables more nutrition sensitive business models and more nutrition sensitive business activities. So what does PSE for nutrition actually look like? Recently, USAID put out a guide on developing private sector partnerships. The link to this is also in the lab description, with the goal of enhancing progress towards nutrition goals. And they identified 7 archetyped partnerships. These are broad categories into which private sector partnerships for nutrition typically fall. Now, this doesn't mean that if your partnership doesn't fall into one of these categories that you're not doing private sector engagement for nutrition, but they do form a good foundation for how we think about designing new partnerships that do engage the private sector for nutrition, and or like I said, creating an enabling environment for nutrition. So the first category is those that they identified as being producer facing. These are working with producers or processors to improve their operations to create more nutritious crops or products. Next, we have consumer-facing initiatives. So these are working with value chain actors, not necessarily with consumers themselves, but with value chain actors to influence the distribution and improve consumer access and demand for nutritious foods. And then finally, we have these enabling environment initiatives, which are seeking to improve the policies and capacities for oversight that will enable and incentivize businesses to uptake more nutrition-sensitive practices. So going about the actual process of PSE for nutrition, well, first we need to identify what are the major changes that we want to see in the food environment. What are the challenges to nutrition in the food environment that we're seeing? We then seek to identify market actors with the potential to influence these dimensions of the food environment that we've identified as being most important. And once we've identified an array of potential partners we want to work with, we then go on to develop partnerships with a strategic portfolio of those actors in order to create shared value. And finally, once those partnerships have been developed, we're going to use principles of adaptive management and partner health monitoring to ensure that we're making progress on those partnerships and that all the parties are experiencing the mutual benefits, that shared value, those results that we anticipated. And the results in progress we see from these partnerships will then in turn inform further rounds of partnership creation with other actors as necessary, needed to transform the food system and improve the food environment. So this isn't necessarily, a one-time through process, but we're really looking at how we can engage with partners to transform the food system that leads to changes in the food environment. And so oftentimes that's going to take multiple partnerships over time. So I won't spend too long on identifying the food environment change objectives, because this is an area where I know a lot of people already have a good deal of experience, and there's lots of really great resources out there for how to get a better sense of what's happening in the food environment. But here we're essentially looking for the main constraints to nutrition within the food environment for the target audiences we have in mind. And it's important during this process to keep in mind what is realistic and feasible to change given the timeline and the objectives of the project or the activity we're working on. So, several sources that you can pull from online, the food systems dashboard, the global nutrition report. There's a lot of sources of information online with really good nutrition data that you can use to inform a desk review of the food environment. But then there's also, of course, a lot of tailored contextualized surveys that you can implement to get a better sense of the barriers to nutrition. In particular, we found that conducting surveys such as consumer preference surveys, demand surveys, market price surveys can be beneficial, not just to help you understand what's happening better in the food environment, but these can prove very valuable in the process of creating private sector partnerships, because they can provide evidence on the potential business opportunities for investing in nutrition. So you really get sort of a double bang for your buck if you're using these surveys to collect information that will then further inform and incentivize partners to want to engage with the problems that you've identified. So once we've identified our food environment change objectives, we can start to identify and engage with potential partners. This starts with conducting an initial stakeholder scan using desk reviews and networks that you might already have in country to identify what actors might be interested in addressing the nutrition challenges that you've identified. This roadmap takes us through a variety of tools that can help narrow down and prioritize our initial scanning. Essentially, along this way, we're looking to collect more information to understand what the potential capacities and incentives these businesses have to work on the issues that we've identified. This roadmap is from the ACDI VOCA PSE Toolkit, which you can find online. It's also linked in the Learning Lab description, and it will be a really helpful resource to anyone that's looking to undertake these processes, either for the first time or, I think there's still always room for doing PSE better. And it essentially guides you through a lot of the challenges and giving ideas for how to conduct this process better. So you can find that online, but it takes you through essentially partner identification, the co-creation process, developing, partnerships with value, partnership monitoring, and adapting, the whole process start to finish. So I highly recommend you look at those resources if this is something you're interested in engaging with more. So in terms of this first step of stakeholder scanning and prioritization, we're going to spend a little time talking about that, because this is what sets the stage for whether or not you're able to identify businesses that have a strong degree of alignment and capacity to contribute to the change that you're hoping to see in the food environment. Now, besides conducting desk reviews, like we mentioned earlier, it's important to also leverage the networks and the connections you already have in the area you're working. These might be potential partners themselves, but they also are a valuable source of information on that private sector and political landscape that will influence which partners you prioritize and the types of activities you undertake with them. If you don't feel that you have adequate networks to start this process, one thing that you can do is consider building these networks and establishing strong relationships with private sector actors by hosting events such as industry forums, innovation challenges, or pitch contests. Of course, relying on referrals of word of mouth is important. But really, these types of activities can, besides fulfilling the function of getting to know about all of the different actors that might be in a space, these types of events can also have a lot of value for the actors that participate, especially if they're able to make new contacts within their industry, get connected to new resources or potential investors, etc. So by coming out early and, proving and showing, demonstrating to businesses that you understand what they care about, that you can add value to their business, that's a really good way to get the relationship started on the right foot, and a lot more likely for that business to want to engage with you later on if they've already experienced some benefit by engaging with project activities. Now, as you're conducting these private sector landscapes and leveraging your networks, it's important that along the way, you're collecting and capturing enough information about these firms to get a good sense of what their incentives are, what their capacities are, what their alignment is, that might help you later on down the road in partnership. So understanding which of these businesses might make a strong partner that has aligned incentives with your project objectives to help move towards that change you're hoping to see in the food environment. So now I'm going to turn it over to Jahamo briefly to discuss what the experience was like on FTF Resina, which, as we mentioned, is a food systems development project leveraging private sector engagement in northern Mozambique. They're in the process, they've already developed several private sector partnerships and are in the early stages of those partnerships. But turning it over to Jahamo to get a sense of what it was like to conduct this process of mapping the partners, some of the challenges they faced and how they addressed them. Jahamo, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Catherine. I would like to start by saying that all this process that Catherine presented, at same level of degree, we use it, we utilize them after we pass through the call for application, or when in the process of engaging partners to support us in implementing our activities. But I would like to focus more on the challenges or our experience in terms of mapping or identifying potential partners. In the market that we are in Nampula province, for instance, the market is very thin. The private sector that is available with capacity with expertise and capacity and financial resources to invest in promoting systemic changes are very low. Just for instance, the limited numbers of private sector that we have are used to work with projects, with dollar-funded projects for ages. So the other challenge that we had was to move from that biased market actors to a lower level of market actors, where in areas where we are operating, which are commercial and semi-commercial actors. Commonly, those are based in the rural areas, which is the focus of our group. So we are downing the level of entry points from big companies to the mid to SMEs and micro enterprises, which are based in the remote areas. So we had to have an approach to be able to attract them to our project. The other issue that we faced because of the market theme is that we have to, USAID put us a challenge to identify new partners. We have to give opportunities for other market actors. So looking into the areas where we are operating, not just in terms of new partners, but we have to also to consider the inclusion objectives, target companies which youth-owned companies that also considers gender aspects. So the solutions that we had to make this possible was to launch a call for applications for targeting those areas that the project are operating. Instead of launching as a project normally do in the newspapers. So the newspapers, those market actors that are in the rural areas have limited access to that information. So we targeted these areas utilizing, for example, community radios, and also conducting local workshops. So local workshops, we invited local market actors where we pitched FTF Resina approach, where we pitched FTF Resina key objectives and key results. As well, we explained how or what we expect from those partners, because the experience of submitting proposal also is very weak. The experience of interacting with projects is very weak. So those workshops also helped us to identify those partners. As well, it's important to collaborate with local authorities, because they are the ones who knows who is or who are the key market actors in the local areas that can also be positive or can influence positive to achieve the key results that we aim to achieve. As well, deposit box. As you may know, we are all used to receive proposals via email. So We use deposit boxes at the local level because the use of internet, use of emails is very low. So this deposit box also helped us to collect as much as numbers of potential partners. Just for instance, we managed to secure 249 ideas or potential partners. So I would like to end up by sharing this experience of how to solve a problem or how to solve a challenge to map or to attract partners to our project. Yes, Catherine?
Great, thank you. Yep, just took me a second to find the mute button. Great, thank you, Jahamo. Yeah, and I think that, brings up a couple of good points too about considering, in terms of when you're looking for stakeholder scanning, when you're looking for potential partners, to understand what level of partners you're looking at, or that you're looking for, what are the characteristics that they have, especially when you're thinking about inclusion for women and inclusion for youth that might not have access to the traditional streams of access to business information and connections to projects or connections to potential funders. So tailoring those processes to be sure that you're meeting you're actually reaching the types of actors that you're interested in partnering with. So, okay, now that we have this idea of who we might want to work with, how do we actually move into creating a successful partnership? Well, the first and one of the most important pieces of a successful partnership is this idea of strategic alignments. So it's critical to ensure that both parties in the partnership are going to be receiving equal benefits from holding up their end of the agreement. They have to have the same intentions regarding what they would like to achieve as a result of the partnership, and that those objectives are aligned with the value proposition of the other actor for their participation in the partnership. So essentially, both parties have to understand what the benefit is and actually see that as a genuine benefit. And they have to understand that the partnership is going to function because both parties are going to be receiving that benefit. So in this case, when we're talking about both parties, we're talking about you, who is, a research institution, who is a donor-funded project, who is an NGO, and then the other party is typically the private sector organization. Or multiple private sector organizations. You can have multiple people in a private sector partnership. It just becomes, of course, more complicated to ensure that everybody is receiving a true value proposition when that happens. What does strategic alignment actually look like? Well, first, like I said, it's important to have a very clear value proposition for all parties engaged. They understand exactly what benefits they're going to be getting out of the partnership. Strategic alignment means that contributions into the partnership have measurable objectives. Everybody can see what everybody else is putting in, and that they're pulling their share of the work. Strategic alignment is going to save time and resources because there's less confusion and less going back and forth about why we're here, what we're doing, if it's really worth it to us. All of that is hammered out at the beginning. And this keeps partners informed and motivated because they see that the other actor in the partnership is putting in that time and effort to get those results. And it provides direction towards the anticipated outcomes and pathways to get there. People know where they're headed, and they know that the benefits that await them from undertaking the activities that they've agreed upon. And what does it not look like? Well, misalignment on what is to be achieved and misalignment on why an organization is partnering. And this is why it's important, as you're developing the terms of a partnership, to be sure that there is a genuine interest and commitment to fulfilling the terms of that partnership. In some cases, this might take some serious due diligence and verifying from trusted sources about the potential motivations of a new partner. And we'll discuss due diligence a little bit at the end of the lab today, but I think Jahamo made a good point of the importance of engaging local authorities to get a good sense of who is who, especially when you're working with private sector actors that might be very new to the field or not have a long business track record that can prove that they're, in it for the right reasons. So this brings us to, thinking about what is it that businesses actually value when we're talking about creating a shared value. What do we have, what do we have in our capacity to offer businesses that they might actually value? And typically we think about profit. And yes, that is true, but there's also other things. So businesses in the food systems, especially, tend to place very strong value on having reliable and trusted relationships within their supply chain. So being sure that they can trust their sourcers, having access to a diversity of sources, having access to a diversity of buyers and end markets. They can also, value those relationships with potential investors or with political influence that can help maintain a pro-business operating environment. And to varying extents, they also care about maintaining a strong corporate image, which might include aspects of social responsibility. This is typically going to be either very small or very large businesses that have this idea, not necessarily in the growth stage, but in that maintaining their corporate image and maintaining market share because people respect their products and respect their business models. And they're also interested in finding ways to mitigate their risk, both by reducing exposure to potential risks, but also being able to manage and adapt to changes in supply chains or markets. Of course, we all, saw this in the recent pandemic. Where businesses that did have adaptable supply chains were much more likely to be able to make it through unscathed. And that's something that, especially these days, businesses really value because they've seen the importance of having that capacity to manage risk. Something that's important to be aware of when we're working with businesses is issues of competition and competitive advantage. So it's important as a donor project, or it's important as an institutional actor to not get too tied to any one business and inadvertently influence the competitive environment in which other businesses in that sector are operating. We might face challenges maintaining trust and open cooperation if we're interested in working with multiple businesses that are competitors in the same sector. So we have to carefully manage these situations to maintain trust. This might take measures such as signing a non-disclosure agreement or avoiding working with similar businesses on similar activities. So something that we often do at ACDI Avoca is we're working with businesses that are all working in maybe the same supply chain, that are performing similar functions, but we're working on different activities. So each sort of has their own competitive advantage from the type of activity that we're doing with them, but we're not necessarily pitting two businesses head to head against each other and partnering with both. That can erode a lot of trust and not make us quite as attractive of a partner to work with in the future. But remember, we're really interested in the health of the food system and the function of the food system more than the success of any one firm. So, while we might be working with a firm in order to demonstrate an innovation or to, develop a new food product, that is done with the intent that it will change the food system as a whole, that will demonstrate that innovation for others to adopt it as well. Our priority is to enable and facilitate the conditions that it will improve the flow of nutritious foods from producer to consumer. Businesses will come and go throughout the system, but it's the function of the system that's going to provide the long-term sustainability for improved nutrition. Finally, businesses often operate on a timeline that's very different from donor projects and institutions. When partnering with private sector actors, it's important to be prepared to work quickly, or if you know that you're not going to be able to work quickly or your timeline, to set those expectations early. It's important to know your limits about how you can and can't how you can and can't partner, what you can and can't do, what you can and can't pay for, and how long it will actually take to put those activities into practice. So being very transparent about that, and not promising what you can't deliver. Failing to deliver like that really does erode trust and will undermine your future partnerships. A crucial ingredient to a successful partnership, and why we're doing this at all, is the concept of additionality. And this is what creates actual transformational change and enables private sector partnerships to be a strategy that has an impact above and beyond what what a project could achieve without partnership. So when we're developing partnerships, we have to identify what is it that's unique that we can bring into an equation, that complements and works in synergy with the services or inputs that are already available in the current system. Essentially, we're looking for a partnership where 1 + 1 = 3. That's more than the sum of its parts. We have to ensure that the interventions and the activities that we're proposing are absolutely necessary to achieve the desired change that we want to see in the food environment. That this isn't something that somebody else is already doing, or that the business would be able to achieve on their own if they didn't partner with us. This means that the private sector or investor would not have engaged in this issue without our involvement, or the partnership is going to substantially increase the impact and sustainability of the activity we're undertaking. For example, the company wouldn't have been able to finance the activity themselves within a reasonable time frame. They don't have the knowledge or the skills to implement the activity. Implement the activity alone, or they wouldn't be able to afford or find in-country assistance, or they're unwilling or unable to implement the activities because of how much it will cost, or that they see that there will be a great risk to undertaking that activity, and that the risks or costs are going to be much greater than the benefits that it would offer them. So what does additionality actually look like? Well, it could be improving the quality of a product or service in a way that enhances the food environment for the key populations that we're working with, or that could allow that change to happen a lot faster or to a greater degree. It could look like expanding into new locations that currently lack access to nutritious foods, new locations that the businesses themselves wouldn't have been able to reach without our support, or an initial investment developing and rolling out a new nutritious food product, that is meant or tailored to the key populations that we're looking to benefit. De-risking a new business model that will help improve access to nutrition, or providing a stamp of approval. We have a lot of credibility often as institutions or as donor organizations, that can attract other investors. We can act as an honest broker between two parties that are making a deal, serving to introduce and help broker business deals. What doesn't it look like? Well, it doesn't look like business as usual. So doing more of the same thing at a different scale. And this is a really critical point, because without additionality, you're just providing a subsidy for the business to do what it already would have done. And we really don't want to fund businesses to just undertake their normal business operations, or to undertake activities they were already planning to do themselves. This is unsustainable and potentially distorts the market. It isn't contributing to any new results. The business would have already done this, and we could have used our partnership funds to go do something else. So in this case, if we're just paying a business to do something they already would have done, we've got a 1 + 1 = 1. We're actually worse off than we started. So additionality is really that key ingredient that makes partnerships a potential strategy for transformative food systems change. So what are some of the types of activities we can do to bring additionality into a partnership as a donor project or as an institution? What can we actually offer in a partnership? Well, the first is technical assistance. That's serving as a collaborator, say on a research program, or helping to develop a technological innovation. We might serve as an expert, providing technical expertise or consultation to help the partner undertake activities that will contribute to shared objectives. Additionality might be brought through cost sharing. This is often the base assumption. A lot of people think of when they think of what partnership means. But I do urge you to think critically about when it does and doesn't make sense to fund activities in the context of a private sector partnership. So one such instance where it might make sense is the case where we can use funds to buy down the risk of trialing a new business innovation that will create evidence that can incentivize ongoing investments by that partner and by other companies who now see the potential and competitive advantage of that innovation and take it up themselves. So essentially expanding that into the system and demonstrating the benefit of an intervention that of an innovation that would not have existed if we hadn't made that initial capital investment. But we can also serve as an investor or fundraising that leverages our funding or initial capital to attract investors that will be able to contribute more over a longer time. So we can essentially serve as a catalyzing investor where we put in a small amount of money at first that allows businesses to then pursue larger and more sustainable funding. And then finally, we have the role of convening power. So this is where we can serve as a facilitator of valuable relationships between actors that have shared objectives or that face similar challenges so that they can work to overcome them together. We can also advocate, leveraging our power and connectivity within, say, country governments, within institutions, within trade groups, to advocate and persuade for change that's going to enable businesses to adopt more nutrition-sensitive business models. So this is where we're working to create that enabling environment where businesses are incentivized and enabled to make nutritious changes to their business. And so now I'm going to pass it back over to Jahama, who's going to tell us a little bit about what this process of seeking shared value and additionality looked like in the partnership development that FTF Resina did.
Thank you once again. Can you hear me? Yes. Okay. Basically, what we do. So, in terms of the as the process of seeking shared value in addition, the partner selection is very crucial. It's very crucial, and it all starts by identifying the right partner, as Catherine has mentioned. And for that purpose, we use predefined selection criteria, which those pre-selection criteria are aligned with the objectives of FTF Resina, the GSE, scalability, innovation, level of investment, just to name a few of examples of selection criteria that we use to select a partner. And we also use the system mapping change also to identify the partners. So then to find opportunities for collaboration is the second activity that we use to identify the possibilities of collaboration. In this phase, the possibilities for collaboration are initially identified and evaluated through the intervention ideas and solution activities, which might be expand distribution models, strengthen the supply chain, improve capacity. Those solutions are proposed by potential partners that are aligned with the project objectives. As we are looking also for activities which are not business as usual. We are looking for innovative ideas, approaches, and solutions that contribute to achieve objectives, while also offering opportunities for crowding in the market actors, including the scalability of the intervention. So, one area that we also is very, very, very important is the proposal of pitch. We ask the partner, once we identify the partner, we propose him to propose a pitch. We propose him to present a pitch. Why we do that? Because normally through the submissions through the proposal that they submit, they're not clear in terms of what the partner can, or what the partner intends to do, or to why the partner is intended to collaborate with the partner. So this proposal of which allows us to have a clear understanding of their proposal, as well to secure the consensus in terms of we go, or there's a go or no go ahead with the partner. Then we pitch, as I mentioned before, we pitch the FTF Resina. Basically, we pitch the call for applications in terms of securing from the partner a clear understanding of the call, key objectives and results of the project. Because normally the language that we use in our call of applications are not clear to the partners. For them, it's quite difficult to understand what we as a project expect from them. So this is an opportunity for us to get also the partner on board. And so based on our pitch, based on the pitch of the partner, we secure, or we secure possibilities of collaboration, as well if there are opportunities for potential shared values, because the partner have one objective, the project has another objective. So during this meeting, we clearly come up with a clear understanding if there's a potential for shared value. So, but this is an exercise that we value the most. And the exercise that we've been doing so far, we have engaged around 7 to 8 partners. We have, most of the case, the consensus, the shared values we have secured through these meetings. Hello?
Thank you, Jahamo.
I don't know if I was clear, or you want me to be more.
No, I think all good. And yeah, if anybody has any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. I also noted that somebody was sharing some examples of private sector partnerships that contribute to nutrition. So maybe Jahamo or JJ, if you'd like to, another question right now in the chat about providing an example, if you want to add anything from there, but we will have some examples at the end of the conversation as well. So, don't give them away yet. If anybody else has any examples that they'd like to share, please feel free. That might help clarify this for some folks. So getting into, once we have sort of our idea about what partners we want to work with, and what partners we want to work with, how do we go into the actual conversation where we negotiate a partnership? This process is called co-creation. It's a design approach that brings people together to collectively produce a mutually valued outcome using a participatory process. We're assuming shared power and shared decision-making amongst all of the parties involved. And the advantage of this type of process is that we're going to be able to jointly identify and define the problems versus coming in with a more prescriptive idea of what needs to be done and how we're going to do it. So it offers an opportunity to explore a diversity of value propositions and building upon each party's respective interests and expertise. And what we're really doing here is collaborating and scoping to design a potential partnership that allows us to achieve our shared objectives and that benefits both parties, and that both parties are mutually responsible. Sharing the risks essentially ensures that everybody has some skin in the game. And while the process of co-creation is very collaborative, it's important to come into it prepared with an understanding of the capacities, incentives of the partner to work with you towards creating a more nutritious food environment. This is going to inform your negotiation process and your approach, and give you an idea of what persuasive data or evidence you're going to need to bring into that conversation to ensure that your potential partner is seeing the value in what you're proposing. And a helpful tool in making this assessment is the will skill matrix. So we're mapping our potential partners onto this matrix in order to see where we need to focus on building incentives or building capacity to achieve the identified objectives. So if a partner falls, for example, in the lower left quadrant, they're lacking both incentives and capacity, we might want to consider whether this is in fact the appropriate partner to work with. However, if they're in the upper right quadrant, they're possessing both the incentives and the capacity to change, then we have to ask, why haven't they already made this change or adopted this more nutritious business model? So this could be a very powerful partner because they have strong incentives and they have the capacity, but we need to identify in the co-creation process, what are the barriers that they're actually facing? They're potentially external, that we would need to help address in order for them to undertake this new activity. So partnership negotiation is a soft skill. There's really no one right way to do it, but there certainly are a lot of wrong ways. So in this next activity, we're going to listen to 2 partnership negotiations. And I want you to observe, and these questions will be on the screen as we listen, but where is this conversation taking place? Who is involved? What has the engagement between the donor project and the partner looked like, this business looked like before the conversation? How is the offer of partnership being framed? Is there truly shared value and additionality? And do you get the feeling that there's genuine commitment from the agreements that they come to at the end?
Good afternoon. Thanks for coming into our offices today. I read a bit about your company, and I understand you have some ideas for improving availability of nutritious foods in our project intervention areas. Can you tell us more about that?
Absolutely. Currently, we're having trouble getting adequate supply of ground nuts, and a lot of what we're collecting is really low quality. We wanted to talk with you about finding some ways to address our supply chain challenges. Maybe we could make some warehouse improvements?
Interesting, yes. Reducing spoilage could help us both meet our goals. You know, our donor is interested in developing a new ground nut snack bar. We could build on some of your processing expertise to develop and market it. The profits could be used to pay for the warehouse upgrades.
A ground nut-based snack bar? That's interesting. We consider ourselves more of an aggregator, but we do have some open space in our shelling facility. If you're willing to support us, it could work. What would be involved in developing this product?
Well, first, we'd need to invest in new equipment tailored for food processing, specifically for making and packaging snack bars. We'd need to ensure the packaging preserves the product's quality and complies with local and international standards. We can provide technical assistance and cover most of the investment costs for the equipment.
That's reassuring to hear. It sounds like a substantial shift for us, though. What kind of support can we expect during the transition?
We'll be with you every step of the way. We can offer training for your staff on the new equipment and help you navigate the regulatory landscape for packaging and labeling, ensuring your new product meets all necessary standards. Essentially, we're buying down the risk of your business expansion.
It sounds like a promising opportunity. We'd be open to exploring this further. Our priority would still be to address the spoilage issue in our supply chain. But if we can simultaneously work on developing this new product with your support, it seems like a win-win.
Absolutely. You have a lot of infrastructure already in place, and expanding into this new market will help you fund improvements to your supply chain. Let's move forward with planning the investments in equipment and outline the training programs. Let's get started.
Okay, so I will now open it up. What were your thoughts on that conversation? And feel free to use the chat. We're looking at that. Do you feel that was a successful partnership negotiation? Okay, so I'll give you my thoughts on that. So where is this conversation taking place? It's taking place, it seems like, in the donor's office. Who's involved? The donor and a single representative from the company. What has engagement been like before this conversation? Very little. He didn't seem to really know much about the company, did he? And the company didn't even really seem to know much about what they actually wanted. He kind of steamrolled him, right? He was somewhat successful. Okay. Yeah. Right, exactly. The company really had an idea. They didn't really have too strong of an idea. And so when the donor came in with a different idea, they just sort of agreed to it, right? There was sort of no mutual trust. There wasn't really, I feel like there wasn't really shared value and additionality. Yes, they were pushed to fill the idea that the donor wanted, for sure. So it wasn't necessarily an activity that the company was going to undertake on their own, but there wasn't really shared value. This wasn't something that the partner really felt like they needed. And I think this is the type of partnership that often gets us into these scenarios where we go and we see, equipment that was purchased for a group to do some sort of processing that's never been used, or that, was used for a year and broke and was never repaired, because it was never really adding genuine value to what they were doing. They weren't actually getting anything from it. Maybe, the donor had convinced them briefly that it was the right move, but it wasn't fit for their business. And at the end, we don't really get a feeling. I would say that there's genuine commitment to this. The partner is willing to undertake it, but isn't excited about it, right? He's not necessarily feeling like this is going to meet his needs and this is going to solve his challenges. So let's rewind. Let's give them a chance to do this conversation again. We're going to be in a slightly different scenario, but with similar characters. So let's see how it goes this time.
Hello, Samantha. Charles, thank you so much for inviting me to your office today. I understand after our last conversation you spent some time putting together a proposal for partnership. What did you come up with?
Absolutely. We really appreciated your guidance on collecting data from our field teams. We found that we're facing significant spoilage rates during transportation and storage due to poor handling practices and warehouse management. We'd like to talk about how we can invest in better temperature-controlled storage facilities and improving training for our logistics team to ensure the groundnuts are handled properly. This should drastically cut down on waste.
Yes, reducing spoilage would certainly benefit your bottom line. We're interested in working together to achieve this, and we also have an idea that might complement your goals. Our donor is keen on developing a new, nutritious snack bar using groundnuts. If you were interested in pursuing this, it could add significant value to your operation. We could support on purchasing the processing equipment and providing technical assistance. How do you feel about exploring this opportunity with us?
A groundnut-based snack bar? That's intriguing, but I'll be honest with you. I don't think we're the right fit for that idea. At the Innovators Forum you hosted last month, I met a woman with a factory just north of the city that's been looking to expand her product line into using groundnuts. We talked about a deal, but she didn't have the technical capacity to develop the product. What if we brought her into this conversation? That could create a new market for our output while leveraging her existing capabilities. And we can focus on improving our own supply chain and groundnut sourcing.
That's an interesting suggestion and could certainly accelerate the development of the snack bar while providing new markets for your supply. What do you feel you would need in order to reliably supply safe and high-quality groundnuts?
Well, we'll definitely need support for technical assistance for better training our warehouse teams. We haven't been able to find anyone with up-to-date information on this in the country. We'd also want to invest in some infrastructure improvements. We've heard about solar coolers that can help keep the humidity down, but they are just so expensive.
We can definitely support on this. We have a contact with an international supply chain consultant. We could pay for him to come do an audit and develop a training that you can scale out across your aggregation network. But we're a bit concerned about the cost of the solar coolers. They're imported. How would you keep them running in the long term?
Given our tight budget, we can allocate some funds for the storage improvements, but we were hoping for significant support from you. especially as it will take a while for the new orders to start producing cash flow, and we'll need to raise the salaries of our high-performing warehouse managers to keep them from going to work for the cereal exporters.
I understand your concern about the cash drain from the initial investment, especially when it comes to keeping your best staff on board. Let's take a step back and think this through. What if we covered more of the upfront cost to train the staff? Then once the deal comes through, we can work together to allocate the new profits into ongoing training, staff promotions, and a savings fund for infrastructure improvements. The new orders should be enough to get a good interest rate on a loan, and we can discuss covering the installation costs down the road.
It's true that the solar coolers are a bit of a risk. There have been lots of solar panel thefts lately. It would come with a lot of liabilities, security guards, maintenance costs, expensive repairs.
Right. And with the management improvements and increased throughput from the new orders, you may find they are not even necessary to get your losses down.
I think that sounds like a good start. The initial consultation and trainings will be really helpful, and we can revisit the solar coolers down the road.
Great. I suggest we sign a non-binding memorandum of understanding that outlines our longer-term goals through partnership to make sure we are on the same page. Then we can develop a one-year program description that captures the initial support we talked about today. We'll send a draft with some milestones to ensure that you are staying on track with your goals and commitments. It's okay if your priorities change. We just need to know as soon as possible so we can adapt to stay on track for our goals.
Absolutely. I understand you are not just here to throw money around. We'll look for the draft and get back to you with any comments.
Okay, so how did that go? What was different this time? Well, first, it seems that this time they met in the office of the company itself. There were more people in the room, there were more people engaged in the conversation. And it also seemed like they had had several interactions beforehand. They had established a level of familiarity and trust. They were willing to be honest with each other in that conversation. The company wasn't afraid to push back. Power was more evenly distributed. And how did we get there? They had established a relationship beforehand. The business had already experienced some benefit from working with that donor through the innovators forum that they mentioned, where they were able to, try to make a deal with a potential buyer. So there's much better, potential challenges are raised. There's a call to action for each sector, right? Exactly. There's good shared value. Everybody's going to get what they want, and even other companies will benefit from this. So there's this hint at sort of maybe a systemic change that could be happening from this, that maybe supply really is a challenge in the area, and by addressing this issue, there's going to be other processors that are going to be able to use that supply to develop more nutritious snack bars. So there's a clear case for additionality. We heard that the expert wasn't available in the country. Those solar coolers are really expensive. And these asks were based on actual evidence. The donor had supported and sort of given some guidance to the company on how to figure out exactly what it was they needed to collect some data from their field teams. Another important thing that happened in this conversation was this idea of principles-based negotiation. So when there was some conflict over who would pay for what, we stepped back to see that the real concern wasn't necessarily the position of who would pay for what, but the principles. So they were concerned about staff retention. And this can be a very common problem, right? That we give some sort of really advanced state-of-the-art training, work with a company to upskill their staff, and then they go work for somebody else. They get hired by some international company that will pay more. So this company realized that they were going to have to raise the salaries of their staff after this training in order to retain them. And then that was sort of making them stressed out about the potential costs and being able to pay for these other investments. So they found a way to address that concern rather than arguing about who should pay for what. And then I think it was also important that at the end, the donor suggested a very flexible partnership mechanism. So MOU, a memorandum of understanding, can be this non-binding commitment that everybody signs that sort of lays out the terms of a partnership in the long run, even though the funding is only going to the funded partnership is only going to be for 1 year. It sort of opens up opportunities for iterative processes down the road. So, in terms of developing a positive co-creation process, we have to ensure that both sides know what to expect. Bring any data or presentations that you'll need beforehand, and know what your BATNA is. Know when to walk away. What is the best alternative to a negotiated agreement? And you can do a little bit more reading about this idea of partnership negotiation if this is something that interests you. In the introduction phases, you want to find a way to build mutual trust and respect, set a collaborative tone, and demonstrate good intentions on both sides. Frame this with establishing a shared understanding of the context. Do we see the problems the same way? And understand each other's interests beyond your position. So what is it that you really care about that's making you be in this position? Then we're moving into ideating. We're seeking ways to achieve our mutual objective sustainably. We're trying to find that shared value and ensure here that we're creating additionality, something that partner would not otherwise do. And this is the place where we really want to devote significant time to brainstorming a wide range of possible options. Then, once we have all of those ideas, those potential ways to partner together, we start to narrow it down transparently. What are we actually going to do under this partnership, and come to agreements about who will contribute what? And then finally, there's this phase of polishing. This is where we're, after the conversation, we're working on the final refinement of the ideas. We're documenting what we've agreed upon, and we're developing things like milestones and budgets that everybody can agree on based on the conversations that we had during the co-creation process. And here are just a few helpful resources. I already mentioned the ACDI VOCA PSE toolkit, the Nutrition Sensitive Intervention Selection Tool. The Springfield Center has an operational guide to making markets work for the poor that has a section on essentials of partner engagement and intervention management that I think is really helpful. And then if negotiation is an area you're interested in, the seminal text is called Getting to Yes. And this is often referenced in a lot of business curriculums and partnership negotiation. So now we're going to move into some breakout groups to get a chance to try this ourselves. So your breakout group is a team of consultants that's been hired by a food systems development project in Mozambique, hint, hint, to advise on private sector partnership development. The project has the goal to improve diet diversity for rural women and children in poor households. We've conducted a food environment analysis. We've conducted a private sector landscape assessment. We're going to very quickly go through the basics of those. They're also going to be in the mural board. And essentially, you're going to make a recommendation on which partner you suggest for, or which business you suggest for partnership, and suggest some potential activities to do with them. So in terms of what we found in our food environment analysis, and this is all based on the real life scenario of the FTF project in Mozambique, we found that affordability of food was a big challenge. There was very low diet diversity, but despite this, women really didn't perceive themselves as having a high risk of vitamin deficiency despite their poor diet habits. There was a lot of brand and label familiarity. So households that were purchasing processed or packaged foods would typically go with the same familiar label over and over. And affordability was a big influencing factor in their choices. And there was also a lot of trust between vendors and consumers. They would tend to prefer to go back to the same market vendors they're familiar with. And this gets them some benefits, such as small bits of extra food with their purchase, informal credit, and vendors similarly felt that they benefited from high levels of trust. The private sector landscape analysis found that it is indeed a very informal smallholder-based food system. There's very little connectivity to value addition opportunities and market access, poor transportation infrastructure, leading to short and simple rural value chains. So it's a very, there's not a lot of processing. very moving directly from production into sale. Markets are very informal, depending on small-scale operations for aggregation, transport, storage, distribution, etc., and don't have a lot of organization in terms of food safety. Lots of formal and informal layers of control. Then there are infrastructure challenges, transportation networks are an issue, unreliable electricity. It's just a difficult operating environment, and a lot of financial and regulatory barriers, such as poor access to credit and then low literacy rates hindering workforce development. So you identified 3 companies. The first of these was Grow Golden. They produce a biofortified maize flour. Their operations were established with significant donor funding. And their primary buyer are donor-funded nutrition programs. So they're looking to that's their major buyer. The households that are receiving their product are typically doing so at either a free or a very subsidized price because they're being provided by these donor projects. However, when they think about direct marketing to consumers, one of the challenges is that yellow color of the maize flour indicates to many households that it's a low quality product, that it's only for poor families. But they're becoming concerned about the long-term sustainability, and depending on aid procurement, they're seeing a shift towards more facilitative food systems development projects. So they're looking at expanding their market beyond just food aid. So they have this state-of-the-art milling and packing facility, but they're still facing challenges in terms of accessing appropriate lab services, testing it and to ensure that it has the micronutrient content, and then ensuring recruiting and training staff that are qualified to operationalize their food safety standards. The next company is called WinSoya. They produce a fortified corn soya blend, which is distributed to wholesalers and retailers. They primarily sell to supermarkets and small grocers in urban centers. They have a significant marketing operation. They've got brand promoters, social network, an advertising campaign, and they currently sell in 1 kg packages. They undertook an initial market study to understand reaching rural consumers better, and they found that current package size is just too large. It's too expensive for rural consumers. And they tend to see buying porridge in a package as only for a special purpose, such as feeding sick children or elders. And they don't yet have a relationship with the distributor that serves those rural markets, but they know that people are there doing it. And then finally, we have the Samora Market Vendors Cooperative, and this is a cooperative in a small, bustling biweekly market in rural Zambezia. The members are eager to learn and implement strategies to market their products more effectively. They see nutrition and health benefits as a potential way of doing this, but they are facing significant challenges. They have a limited crop variety in any given season. They can't always offer the foods that their customers seek. Seasonal fluctuations and unpredictable yields complicate their ability to have that steady and varied supply of produce for the customers. And they also face some challenges where they're operating in public oversight, and they require a regional commerce department if they want to make any changes in how they do business. And they generally have a relatively low advocacy power. And sometimes local politicians will do food distributions that really sort of crash the market for a lot of their products. So we're going to move back into the mural. You should have a link to it on the chat. And I will put that in here. So let me unlock our group work. Okay, so what we're going to do is go through a process of identifying the food environment change objectives. This says 10 minutes. Let's do 5 minutes for this. I think it'll be pretty straightforward because we're running a little bit behind time. We're going to look at, I've already filled out this sheet that we would use in a private sector landscape analysis. to understand who we should partner with and why. So I've filled in all of these columns, but we're just going to look at what would there be their incentives to undertake an activity that improves the food environment in the way that you identified through the food environment analysis. And based on all of this information, do you think they're a priority for partnership? Do you think it would be reasonable for the project to partner with them? Then we're going to map whoever you think is a priority partner onto the will skill matrix. With, I have given some little descriptions here about, how you might make that decision. And then based on the will skill matrix, this will help inform how you're actually going to think about partnering with them. So pull one of your partners down, and then just quickly think through what would the firm benefit from, how would your project benefit from a partnership, and then finally, and this is where I'd like you to spend the most time, develop an initial offer for partnership that you could bring into the co-creation process. So what activities would you propose to undertake? I've given an example here that's based on the co-creation conversation that we heard, so you can get some ideas from there. And then also pull over some activities that we can offer and the archetypes of private sector engagement to give you some ideas about how you might want to engage with them. So let's go into our breakout groups. JJ and I will be bouncing between the groups if you have any questions, and hopefully it should be pretty self-explanatory based on the descriptions written here. And I've also provided all of these slides that I've just gone through on the companies in the sidebar. So these are all actually real life examples of partners that FTF Resina has, and that they created based on the potential to improve nutrition and to improve the function of the food system. So I want to just turn it over to JJ so we can wrap this up with just going through what these partnerships actually ended up looking like, and how they proceeded with developing nutrition-sensitive business models with all of these companies.
Thank you very much, Catherine. Well, I will go briefly present here some of the examples that FTF Resina, some of the partnership that FTF Resina has been working here in Mozambique. So the first example is a company called Green Agro. This is an agribusiness company that essentially works on processing of yellow maize into flour. So basically, the intent of partnership with this company, FTF Resina is partnering with this company because they want to expand their access to raw materials, so yellow maize, and aiming to optimize their underutilized processing capacity. So right now they are not running it at their best capacity, so they want to increase their capacity of processing yellow maize. So in terms of what happened in the co-creation, so the first idea was to go to the company and meet the company at their own place and sort of discuss in terms of a shared vision for the project, the additional value that the company and the project can work on together to achieve the objectives both for the company and also to the project. So together we analyzed the challenges, what were actually the challenges that we wanted to address, not only as a project, not only as a company, but also looking at the wider, within the wider food system. So what are also other problems that we can, through this partnership, sort of bring solutions or at least support, bring some other ways to improve the food system as in general. So in terms of activities, so I'll just go briefly at what we tried to come up with activities. So the first problem, as you say, that as you see, that was access to raw materials, the yellow maize itself. So and also they had problems in terms of reaching last mile customers in rural areas, because FTF Resina is basically essentially working on achieving last mile consumers with nutritious food. So we decided that we agree, the project and the company, that the activity to adjust the business model. Currently, the company is working on processing and packaging of 2 kg and 5 kg package size of yellow maize, which is quite expensive for most rural consumers. So we agreed that they will introduce 200 grams and 500 gram maize flour packages so that they can work. They can sell in rural areas. It's as you see that most of the current market is in the urban areas with consumers that are able to afford 2 kgs and kgs. So we discussed the possibility of introducing 200 grams and 500 grams. And also, we as a FTF Resina, we have other business partners, other partnerships that are being in co-creation, and some of them address one of the problems that the company is also currently facing, which is the seed, having access to seed, to high quality seeds for their productions, and also extension services. Most the company works with producers in rural areas, but currently the extension service provided by the company is not adequate. And so by increasing so expecting that there will be increase in processing and milling capacity of the company, there was a challenge that we had to discuss in terms of negotiating the costs, who pays for what. So we agreed that the partner should host all costs related to staff and fixed costs. That is, ensure that the staff will be under the responsibility in terms of financial responsibility of the company operation as well, while FTF Resina will cover in terms of equipment and trainings for the staff. So the equipment specifically here is to address as they're introducing the 200 gram and 500 gram kg, there was a need to have a new equipment that will allow them to process and also package these quantities. So the FTF Resina will also support this company to acquire this equipment and also provide the trainings for quality standards of the product. The last thing that we agree was, of course, and what's coming next in terms of developing milestones and indicators for the partnership aligned with the project goals. So as a project, we have our own goals. The company has also other goals, but as we have to report it to our donors, so we have to make sure that the milestone and indicators are aligned with the project goals. So this was the first example. The second example in Resina is a company called Winua. So this company is basically working on expanding the corn soya blend flour distribution. So their network right now is not, their current market is also a urban market, working specifically with big retailers in rural areas. So they're mostly concentrated on the high-end market, not looking at currently having issues to go to the last mile consumers in rural area. And another problem is the company also wants to improve their product quality standards. So we went to this company. They submitted their proposal and we evaluated, and they were considered for co-creation. So during the co-creation, as Jahamo mentioned, that there was a need to come to have additional value, have a common shared vision. So the main challenge that this company was facing is just in terms of having a resale of the product in rural areas. So currently the company only accepts that the resellers the resellers that they're working with, they should buy at least 50 bags per month per vendor. So this is also out of reach of most of resellers in the community areas. So the discussions was around how we can come up with a distribution model that will allow this company to continue the supplying the high-end market, but also looking at the rural areas. So some ideas came up with like introducing distributors that can manage 50 bags per month in the rural areas, but also connect to a smaller retailers called food soldiers. Next slide. So Resina will also work on the demand side of the with other partners in the community. Resina will be working on the demand side, specifically with public health services and also other companies. So another on the consumer side, particularly with the vendors, recently Resina worked supported an intervention in the markets to co-create tailored approach and tailored messages to increase sales of nutritious food for postpartum women in communities. Basically, as you can see here, was the process that we went through. The first was to have a workshop with the vendors to introduce them to the segmentation tool, to the segmentation approach, and then themselves, their vendors, they had to design interventions or message that was specifically designed for each segment of women, and then they tested in the market. And recently we got feedback, and the feedback is very promising. Almost 90% of the women that participated, they had bought at least one food item that they did not consume in the night before, in the day before. Next, Catherine. I think that is all from my side, Catherine.
Yep.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Over to you.
Thank you. Thanks, JJ. Yeah, so as we had mentioned earlier, one of the important aspects before you go into partnership and during partnership is to make sure you're doing your due diligence and risk assessment. So these are just a couple of areas you might want to consider as you're considering partnership. There were some questions in the chat about, how do we engage ethically with companies, knowing that sometimes they can also have negative social nutrition implications for the types of products that they're producing. So it's important to keep an eye on what is their corporate image. Are there recent lawsuits? Are there issues with corruption, stability, publicity, or exclusivity concerns? Is the partner going to be upset that you're going to be working with other partners in to help develop their businesses as well? There's also this aspect of social responsibility. So what are all of the lines of the business that business is doing? Are there any that might have negative human impacts? Do they have appropriate codes of conduct? Are they conducting effective safeguarding with vulnerable populations? So these are important aspects to look at when you're ensuring that you're engaging with an ethical business, as well as environmental responsibility. So do they have data and policies around their environmental impact, the product life cycle, and mitigating risk to the environment and perpetuating, all of these negative climate impacts that we're seeing. And then finally, being realistic of their technical considerations. So do you have buy-in of the leadership? Do they have true motivations for partnership? Are they expressing long-term commitment? And are these activities that we're proposing realistically feasible? And that brings us into the final stage of private sector partnership, and that's adaptive management. So we really want to set up for success. So during co-creation, we want to ensure that we really do have this alignment and additionality. We want to fact check those really hard. We want to co-develop indicators and targets and milestones based on the business objectives of the partners and their capacity and systems for data collection that also align with our own objectives and indicators for reporting back to our donor or reporting back to whoever we owe information on impact to. We want to pick the right instrument for partnership. So we need to make sure that the formalization of that partnership is needs responsive. And there's a really great guide, the ACDA Avoca Operational Guide to Developing Adaptive Partnerships has a really great guide that goes through all of the different instruments that you can use, whether MOUs, memorandum of understandings, program descriptions, fixed price agreements, all sorts of actual documents that you can use to develop partnerships that can be adaptively managed in the future. And it can be fit for the levels of risk and the types of activities you're undertaking. You want to manage these partnerships proactively. These are relationships that you have both between two institutions, but also between people. You want to be able to collaborate so that you can catch any challenges before they become problems and address them early on. And then finally, you want to keep track of the partnership health, measuring it regularly. So scheduling communication, scheduling pause and reflects, ensuring that you have touch points along the program and along your timeline that will allow you both to look back and think, are we really achieving the goals that we wanted to achieve? Are we getting out of this what we thought we were going to get out of this? And what do we need to change so that we can continue on that pathway? So to those of you still with us, I wanted to say thank you. I want to say thank you to the organizers of ANH. I really appreciate this opportunity to share some of our work, and happy to take any questions in the 5 minutes we have left. But otherwise, thank you. And please always, you can reach out. I didn't put my email here, but I'm on the ANH Academy website. You can reach out to me with any questions you have. We're happy to collaborate. And there's lots of really great resources for this type of work in both in this presentation and then in the ANH description for this lab. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Catherine, and thank you to JJ and Jahama for your excellent facilitation as well. This was a really interesting session. And thanks to everyone who joined us today. As Catherine said, please do post any questions you still have in the chat, or you can reach out to ANH Academy or to Catherine after the session. We'll make sure we get your question to her. And finally, we do have one more day of learning labs tomorrow. I've posted the link to the program in the chat box, so I hope you'll join us for our last day. Thanks so much.
Thanks,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Thanks, everyone.
Catherine.